So like basically you're going to tap on once every like 3 beats where that low tone is.
So I just participated in my friend Courtney's neuroscience experiment. He's studying kind of language and music and kind of the links between that.
Ah,
yes.
welcome. This is the good bits, man.
I guess we're going in to get our brains plugged in and do some experiments. Peter's getting a video out of it. He's filming me as we speak.
The scrunch up those, put them in your ear, like just hold them there for a few seconds, and yeah. And final one, some people find hardest. So eventually that low tone will drop out. And then you're tapping on the silencers basically.
So Courtney, who are you and what do you do?
So my name is Courtney, and I guess am a cognitive neuroscientist that studies...
you are the entire field.
I am cognitive neuroscience. And specifically I study music and language, being two things that are relatively, if not completely, unique to humans. Like there's certainly no evidence of any other animals that have a full language capacity, and there are some other animals that have certain aspects of music, but it seems nothing with the sort of flexibility and kind of richness that humans have. So I study certain subcomponents of that, specifically how sort of the rhythms of speech and rhythm sort of relate to how we process these things.
Like, is there any evidence that claims that the kind of the music part of the brain is in some way linked to the language part of the brain, or is that even a useful way to think about it? Like,
yeah, I mean, at some level, like that's kind of true. Like there certainly is overlap between kind of broad brain areas that process music and language, which at some level is not surprising, right? Because they're both like heavily auditory based signals. So like minimally, like it's no surprise that just lower level auditory processing in our brains like overlap there. But even some of the more high level areas that maybe process more sort of music or language specific things, whether they exactly overlap, they're certainly very close to each other in the brain. I mean, historically, like in the study of language in the brain, this goes back to like, you know, the 1900s, and like, you know, this guy called Paul Broca who discovered Broca's area, and Carl Wernicke who discovered Wernicke's area, and like kind of like essentially the argument at the time was that Broca's area was responsible for sort of speech production and Wernicke's area was responsible for speech understanding. That turned out to be a sort of vastly oversimplified kind of model of these things in the brain. Like there's far more detailed models now. But it seems a lot of that basic machinery is kind of whether exactly shared or at least relies on similar types of computations in the brain. Speech, like music, is structured rhythmically over time, so it's not just a random assortment of sounds, but like there's a kind of rhythm to speech, like there is in music, and essentially, I'm looking at how the rhythms of speech and music entrain our brainwaves. So our attention and our ability to process and perceive the world kind of fluctuates over time, corresponding to fluctuations of electrical activity in the neurons in our brain. And I'm sort of quite interested in how sort of rhythmic signals like music and language take advantage of this in order to, you know, give us the ability to process these things in rich ways. Essentially, the gist of it in this study is that you hear speech, and this speech is not entirely naturalistic speech, but it's kind of speech that's kind of synchronized to be quite rhythmic. So like one of the kind of dumb sentences that is in there is something like the boy that the girl helped got an A on the test. So like, you know, dumb little sentence like that, and kind of like the way I just spoke it there, sort of in a quite a rhythmic kind of way. So you hear these sentences, but then importantly, you also tap on this little drum pad thing in time with certain aspects of, you tap in time with certain positions in that sentence, And basically, I'm testing this idea that like if you sort of tap or like perceive a beat to be at a certain point in that sentence, it can either help you process the sentence or kind of like mess with that ability, depending on. And so the general idea is like what you're sort of tapping on. Partly due to this close relationship between our brain's motor system, so how we coordinate action with our attentional system. Essentially, the idea being that, like, when you tap on a certain point, you're essentially guiding more attentional resources to that point in time, and potentially, in this case, if you're guiding those attentional resources to a point in the sentence that's kind of less important, or somehow, like,
right.
Yeah, it kind of messes with that. Ability to understand that sentence.
That's so cool. So interesting.